And we're picking up right where we left off again. Sorry. I'll get this whole phone video thing figured out. But is that really what happened? Is where we left off. If our story ended with 1 Samuel chapter 1, we might think that the only way out of depression is to have God intervene in some miraculous way to fill up the empty places in our lives. But the story doesn't end with chapter 1. The key to understanding Hannah's dramatic turnaround in verse 18 lies in her song, or psalm, that we find in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. There we learn that Hannah's depression lifted when she took her focus from herself and her situation to put her focus on God. In the midst of her misery, she was able to focus on 3 important facts about God. She underlined these 3 facts in her song. The first thing Hannah knew about God is found in 1 Samuel 2, verse 2. There's no one holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. She recognized God's holiness. What could the fact of God's holiness mean to a woman in depression? Well, if we solely define holiness negatively as a separation from all that is unclean, that may make us feel worse about ourselves. Far from being consoling, that would intensify the feelings of worthlessness and guilt that are often part of depression. But God's holiness is not merely the absence of evil. Charles Ryrie suggests an analogy that may help us understand this word holy. Ryrie asks, what does it mean to be healthy? It means the absence of illness. But we all know that being healthy is a lot more than simply not being sick. It also means having energy, being physically able to meet the demands of our daily lives. Thus, holiness is also the presence of positive, right? It is God at work doing what is positively right for us. It is the part of God's nature that keeps him from doing anything in our lives that is not in our best interest. His love is holy love, a pure love, committed to our best good. The second thing Hannah knew about God is found in 1 Samuel 2:3. For the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. The New American Standard Bible translates this verse, for the Lord is a God of knowledge. She recognized God's perfect knowledge. Not only does God's holiness keep him committed to our best good, his perfect knowledge keeps him from doing anything in our lives that is not perfectly right for us. Someone has said that God does not waste his strokes in our lives. That is true. It is true because God knows what is best for us. No trial and error, no foul balls or strikeouts. The Lord is a God of knowledge that gives us confidence in his actions in our lives. The third thing Hannah knew about God occupies much of her song. She recognized God's power. We see this in 1 Samuel 2, 6 through 7, and in verse 8. The Lord brings death and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and rises up. The Lord sends poverty and wealth. He humbles and he exalts. For the foundations of the earth are the Lord's. Upon them he has set the world. The Lord of creation has all power. He can do whatever he wants to do. The fact without the first 2 facts might terrify us. If we knew only that God has all power and did not know anything else about him, we'd have reason for a massive depression. We'd all cower in dark corners to escape his wrath or his caprice. But God tempers his power with his commitment to our welfare. He controls his power with his knowledge of what is best for us. My husband Randy and I have 4 adult children. We have always wanted the best for our children, but often we didn't know what was best for them, which school would be best, which activities would be most wholesome, which church would nurture them. As our children grew up, we made thousands of decisions with their, dropped the book. Thousands of decisions with their interests at heart, but we were not always sure that our choices were wise. Not only have Randy and I often lacked knowledge of what was best for our children, there were times when we knew what was best but didn't have the power to make that decision stick. We're finite, fallible parents who have made lots of mistakes along the way. We wanted what was best for our children, but we lacked the knowledge and the power we needed. God is not finite. God is not fallible. He not only wants what is best for us and knows with perfect knowledge what is best, he also has the power to make the best happen in our lives. God's holy commitment to us, God's knowledge of what is best for us, and God's power to make the right things happen in our lives will all are all linked together for our good. What happened? What snapped Hannah out of her depression? She saw God as he really is. God backed his commitment to her welfare with his knowledge and his power to do what needed to be done in her life. Hannah's story had a happy ending. Samuel was born. She gave him to the Lord, and God gave her 3 more sons and 2 daughters. Yet in the beginning, 1 Samuel 1:18, after she had prayed and eaten some food and stopped looking sad, she didn't know at that moment how the story would end. She was able to do that because she had met with God and understood who he was and what he could do. At the beginning of this chapter, I mentioned that psychologists believe that depression is often related to the way we think about ourselves. It is also true that depression is related to the way we think or fail to think about God. Once we bind ourselves to a God-sized God, we have a resource for dealing with depression. We can focus on God, his holiness, his knowledge, his power. We can face our fears and anxieties in light of his character and his commitment to us. If depression results from the way we think about ourselves, then it can be lifted by the way we think about ourselves in relation to a holy, knowledgeable, and powerful God who is committed to us. Robert Browning reminds us that 'tis looking downward that makes one dizzy. I'm an acrophobe. I don't like being up high on the top of things like fire towers or monuments or skyscrapers. Looking down terrifies me. Browning is right. It is looking down that makes one dizzy. The downward look is the one that leads to depression. The upward look takes away our fear. Look at the God of Hannah, the one who dispelled her depression with a new understanding of his love, his knowledge, and his power. Okay, and then this ends with some questions for personal reflection and group discussion. What does the loving holiness of God mean to you as you face tough places in your life? What does God's complete knowledge of everything mean to you as you live out each day? What does it mean to you that God has complete power to do whatever he wants to do? Except lie. Except go against his nature, right? Number 4, how do these 3 facts about God help or hinder you when you are in depressing circumstances? Okay, that's the end of our Hannah story. And I think I said it in the last Hannah video, and I want to reiterate it. Having been someone who has dealt with depression or feelings of hopelessness related to infertility, I felt all the feels. Out of my 9 miscarriages, every single situation was different. Every circumstance, every desire of my heart at the time that I found out I was pregnant, and every thought at the time that I found out I was no longer pregnant was different. But it was always in prayer that I went. And I believe that's why I was able to be in a healthy way, work through that. But I don't want to give the impression that we just need to pray hard enough or be holy enough for God to grant us that desire of our heart, because that's not what the Bible is teaching in this story of Hannah at all. We do need to pray. We do need to lean into God's holiness and knowledge and power. But there's nothing wrong with you. You're not holy enough just because he has not given you that desire. Okay, so I don't want to be misleading here. You don't have to just pray hard enough. Okay, I love you. I'll be back with another video soon from A Mile in Her Shoes, and be blessed.